Hey there, this is Alvalin Lundgren, and this is Introduction to Graphic Design. In this session, we're talking about designing with symbols. So first, let's get into some history to put things in context. As long as there's been human beings in existence, there has been the need for communication, and our communication has always been visual as well as spoken. We began drawing pictures on rocks and cave walls and probably in the dirt. The more complex ideas became, the more complex pictures became, so there had to be some way to abbreviate ideas into more succinct symbols. And thus was born the pictograph or the pictogram. And pictographs are images that represent an object or thing or even a person. And a pictogram writing system, such as Chinese characters or Mayan characters, is actually used much more than an alphabet-based system, which is phonetic. So as human beings started gathering together and became less nomadic and started living together in towns and villages, the need arose for a written language that would help with trade, commerce, record-keeping, governments. So pictograms became more simplified, both for practicality, but also because of the, shall we say, the technology that was used to record written ideas. Cuneiform is a written system that uses pictographs, but they're simplified. And they're simplified because of the technology. They wrote on clay tablets, which they could easily, rub out. They wrote with styluses made of papyrus or other types of reeds. The stalk of the papyrus plant is triangular. So cuneiform writing is what it is because of the technology, the use of the wedge-shaped stylus being pressed into the clay tablets. One thing that cuneiform writing did was turn things on their side, and the symbols were laid out in a linear fashion. Hieroglyphics are specifically Egyptian, but you can see here how things are laid out in linear rows, and of course they're divided by lines themselves. But you can see how much more organized this is than this clay tablet. It's much easier to decipher this, and we can see that things are spaced comfortably, and it's easy to see what's going on. There's nothing that's jumbled together. It's a lot more orderly than the cuneiform writing. The Egyptians used hieroglyphics to express ideas as ideograms, and they also used the marks to indicate certain sounds. So hieroglyphics kind of blended the idea of how words actually sound with symbols. So hieroglyphics, as it used both symbols with marks to indicate sounds, led to two different types of written communication systems. One is the pictograph, or the pictogram system, such as Chinese characters, but it was also the foundation for alphabet systems, which are phonetic, where the letter forms represent sounds, and then you combine the letter forms into words and the words into sentences. So a pictograph represents an object or a thing. So here's the logo for the World Wildlife Federation, and of course it is a picture, a simplified representation of a panda, and this of course is a simplified representation of an apple. The thing about pictographs is that you don't need a written language to explain what you're talking about. If you've seen a panda, you know what this is, so you don't need any further explanation. An ideograph or ideogram represents a bigger idea or concept. So none of these are used to represent specific things. They are representing ideas. Ideographs are understood through common use and agreement as to what they mean. The symbol here means no, and that on top of the pictograph of the cigarette creates the ideograph that says no smoking. Logograms are symbols that represent specific words. So the ampersand is the symbol for and of course we have the dollar sign, and this is the copyright symbol. So this indicates, when this is used, this indicates that somebody owns the intellectual property that this is displayed on. So pictographs, ideographs, logograms. Then we have phonograms. And phono, like phonograph or telephones, are symbols that represent sounds. Alphabet writing systems use phonograms, and they also use logograms. Then we have emojis, which are ideograms that we use in electronic communication to quickly communicate without writing out an entire word. In the early 20th century, Otto Neurath, who was a social scientist, developed a system of communication that could be used universally. Isotypes are used in information graphics and in data visualization. So the idea was to convert verbal and numerical data, statistics, into visual layouts. The reason we need to know about the isotype system as graphic designers is that it strongly influenced the visualization of information, and it still influences our infographics, visual communications, and signage today. And the system helped establish visual design as a universal language. So since much of what graphic designers do is develop symbols to represent things, it's important to understand what a symbol actually does. It's very similar in role to a pictogram or pictograph in that it's a shape or form that connotes or represents a person, idea, thing, or organization. And as designers, we use symbols and create symbols for logos and icons. A mark is a written or drawn symbol, and we see 3 examples here. They function as logos. They're more of a mark because they're more signature-oriented. A logo is a design that symbolizes a business, a person, or an organization, and is used on all of its services and products in all of its branding and marketing. So we see here the American Eagle Outfitters consisting of the icon, the pictogram, and also typography. Other logos can be phonograms, such as the IBM logo, medallions, such as the Starbucks logo, and monograms, which are creatively intertwined letters. A trademark is used in trade and commerce to identify certain businesses and organizations in certain market sectors to protect competition. So a trademark becomes a legal symbol or representation of the organization or product. And trademarks will either have a TM or the R with the circle around it, which means that the trademark has actually been registered with the government. So you can design logos, but they're not necessarily going to be trademarks unless they are legally registered and recognized as a trademark. Since designers deal in symbols, it's also a good idea to have an understanding of semiotics, because when we design, we want to make sure that what we design is effective. Looking into how people relate to symbols, how they respond, and how symbols work visually and how they work within systems is really important. So semiotics is basically the study of visual communication using signs and symbols, how we interpret them, what they mean to us, how we use them. And semiotics deals more with how meaning is created via the symbols and not exactly what is created. And there are 3 parts of semiotics. There's syntax or syntactics, which is the overall system. It would be like our highway signage system uses visual symbols in certain ways. So there is a systemization or an order of signage that works throughout the United States and relates to the international system as well. And syntax includes a visual grammar and a visual structure. Semantics deals with what those symbols mean, and the pragmatics, the practical, deals with how we deploy those symbols with their meanings within the larger sense. One of the ways we use semiotics in graphic design is that when we create a logo or a corporate identity system, we design an accompanying graphic standard or identity standards manual. so that there is a system and structure to how those visual assets are going to be used. And that way, brand and reputation is established that's consistent and therefore reliable. So in graphic design, we use semiotics to take ideas into their simplest form so that we can communicate quickly, clearly, consistently, and also be memorable to the audience we're trying to reach with the design. Whenever you design a logo, or actually any graphic environment for that matter, there is a two-part relationship. First, there is the thing that you've designed, which is the signifier, the thing that actually conveys or communicates the meaning. It's the vehicle. It's the thing that gets us from point A to point B between our clients and their clients or customers. And then there's the thing that is signified, and that is what the vehicle is actually representing. So when you walk into Starbucks and order some coffee, and you walk out with a cup containing the coffee, that cup has a logo on it. That logo is the signifier. The thing being signified is the brand Starbucks and all that means, all that conveys, all that's associated with that brand. Very often we use the same symbol in different ways. We have a plus sign here on the left, and that has certain connotations depending upon who is looking at the symbol and also how it's being used. In a mathematical equation, it's adding on to or adding up to something. On the other hand, there's a heart, and that could mean that you love somebody, or it could mean that you're dealing with the physicality of the human heart. We use the heart all the time to indicate that we like something, and it's very commonly used. So what we have to do is take these symbols, if we're going to use them, and put them into appropriate context. Here is the plus symbol and the heart, both used for organizations that deal with health and the physical state of the human condition. So we have a relief organization and we have a fundraising organization for research into heart disease. So each of these is just one way that we put those very common symbols into a unique context. Logos are signifiers of what they represent. One of the earliest forms of logos representing a business is the orb and cross. This is from probably the mid-1400s to the late 1400s. It is a double cross there with an orb, and this is the overall printer's mark. And because we don't design out of nothing, and there's really nothing new under the sun, it's just a matter of taking something that already exists and deploying it differently, we can look at the history of logo development for the Nabisco company. And this is the original logo, and I don't know why. I haven't figured out why they actually took this and made it into this. So this is a variation on this, but this existed almost 500 years prior to this logo being developed. And then the logo became simplified. And then there was a merging of two different companies. And then the merged company kind of disappeared, and we went from National Biscuit Company, shortened to Nabisco, because we like to do that sort of thing. Then this symbol became angled in this triangle, and it's been angled in that triangle ever since. And this is the current use. So we still have that sense of the orb, but now it's been compressed into an ellipse. And then the cross has been reproportioned. So despite the change in company name throughout the years, the visual symbol has remained. And the visual symbol, again, was not a brand new idea. It was actually acquired or lifted or stolen, if you will, from a very early symbol in the mid-1400s. Which is why it's really important to know some design history, because then you can draw from things historically and bring them up and allow them to inform your design thinking, inform your visual creativity. So let's take a look at the process of actually designing logos and symbols. And let's do this by looking at a case study. So you may have heard of Evernote, which is a note-taking productivity app. and it works on desktop as well as tablets and phones. And basically the idea of it is that you remember everything. It's the idea that once you write something down, your head doesn't have to remember it. So you can hold on to it and refer back to it. And with Evernote, it not only allows you to take notes, but allows you to tag them and search for them via topic or keyword. Its most recent version is about work teams and communicating within teams and from team to team, as well as just the individual user. So when you think of memory and remembering things, one of the things that comes up worldwide is the idea of the elephant. And the legend or the myth behind the elephant is that elephants remember everything. Elephants never forget. This evidently, I did a little research, this evidently came about in our understanding because elephants tend to always find their way home, or they tend to always do the same things. There's like a generational memory that people say within elephants that they will follow certain paths and end up at certain watering holes that they've never been to before, but simply because they just are able to find their way and remember people and places. Evernote has always used the elephant as a symbol, and it's been using a gray elephant with green typography. And of course, the gray kind of relates to the actual color of the elephant. And in the recent update of their logo, these were some of the explorations that were presented. You can see that there's a variety of different ways to express the form of an elephant. And these were all options or explorations that were presented as the designers showcased their process. One of the things when you are developing things for clients is you want to talk about how you arrived at your design solutions. And so showing your process becomes very important so that the client can understand what went into the development of their visual asset. So here is the updated logo. It uses the little symbol here that we've come to use with documents and notes. The elephant's now green and the typography is now black, so we have a little more contrast than the previous logo. One of the things that's significant is this is the amount of work that went into a logo design. So you can see that visual assets have value for companies and they are worthy of a lot of exploration and research and trial and error to come up with just the thing that is going to be the best iteration or the best version for the company to use. So you can't really design a logo overnight and expect it to work. And you can't buy a logo and tweak a color and change the name on the logo and expect it to work. So there's a lot more involved in logo development. So I think it's important for you to see that at this stage, in this beginning level, so that you understand the weight and the importance of really good design process backed by research and purpose. So not only did they come up with the logo, but they came up with visual systems using, lo and behold, isotype-related symbols. And notice that they started creating patterns and backgrounds using these symbols. So the symbols represent certain concepts. So they actually, instead of just pictograms, they have become ideograms, representing ideas. These are all logos that have been designed by one design group, and some of them are more known than others. Some of them are more complex than others. But each one of these went through a development process that proposed and tested certain ideas to come up with the right logo that was going to fit the organization to represent it as the signifier, the organization, of course, being what's signified. One of the things about logo design and any graphic design is that you really only want to include what is absolutely necessary to get the point across. So we employ a universal design principle known as simplicity. It's also known as Occam's razor. It relates to the idea of irreducible complexity. Things are only as complex as they need to be. So you do a lot of editing. In this case, which is the more powerful logo? Both of these logos use the word target. The one we know really well. The other is a development program of some sort. But there is power in the simple concept, where you start getting into things that don't add to the idea, like the swooshes. Do we need all 5 stars? And what are the swooshes for? Swooshes and logos are right now a very popular thing, and you see a lot of logos with swooshes, and they really don't have any reason to be part of the logo. They're just trendy. But they don't really add to how the logo communicates or how it's received. So this is a much more powerful, more easily remembered logo than this. We can look at a tendency toward simplicity in the development of the Starbucks logo over the years. When Starbucks was originally established in Seattle, it was a brown logo, it was coffee colored, and it was coffee and tea. And it used the muse that is part of Seattle seafaring lore. And what's really interesting to note is that the mermaid, again, is not an original idea. This is based on a French paper watermark from the 1500s. Then it was a while before this logo emerged. And then a few years later, this was the next iteration. And that held out until the last few years, where this is the current iteration. So you can see that each time it's been simplified, and now we don't even have the name of the company, we just have the mermaid. So this is the signifier, and of course the company, Starbucks, is what is being signified. And you can see that the form of the mermaid has been simplified through the years. So that simplification is called abstraction. And abstraction is simply the idea of simplifying, idealizing, or stylizing a shape or form. And we do this all the time in logo design. And depending upon what our purpose is, we're going to abstract or simplify or stylize something in certain ways. So here we have a maple leaf. And here we have a silhouette of a maple leaf, which is pretty much a direct iteration, except now we have simplified the color and removed the interior veining in the image. And there are 3 different abstractions of the maple leaf. In each one of these, you can still recognize the original leaf, but the visual result of the abstraction process is based on the use of the symbol and what it is signifying. Let's look at a case study of abstraction in the logo revision process for the New York Public Library. So this is the original logo, and this is the new logo that they're now currently using. One of the first things that's done in a logo development is that there are goals that are iterated, there's a purpose, there's a look and feel, and what needs to be signified. And notice that they're handwritten. There are certain things that could be referenced or researched, and then we have goals for the logo. And they wanted it to work harmoniously, and it needed to be respectful of the public library's tradition. So they didn't come up with something entirely revolutionary. They started with the lion that sits out in front of the library, basically abstracted that into a high contrast black and white idea, and then started developing sketches and ideas from that. And notice that these are not done on the computer, they're done by hand, because you can more quickly develop ideas and sort and order different ideas on paper and have a variety of sketches and paper spread out in front of you and talk about them than you can with the computer screen. So pencil and paper are a really good idea for anybody who's designing logos. We have further development than looking at the whole lion from this photo, and this is the final symbol. So just by looking at the various sketches and the various stages of development, you get an understanding of the design process. And then that design, that visual icon coupled with the typographic content, creates the entire logo. And you can read more about the process and what went into it here. It's a good idea if you aspire to professional design to create a swipe file or a scrap file, also called a tickler file or an idea file or a morgue file, where you collect things that inspire you. and you sort and organize them into categories and curate things into categories so that you can easily find them, and you have a collection of stuff for your design inspiration. We do not design out of nothing. Ideas don't just hit us. We'll have an idea, we'll see another idea, we'll have another idea, and we'll put all those together into a new idea. Having your own swipe file, developing that, getting in the habit of looking at things and collecting things and curating things is going to help your design language, your design process, and inform your design decisions. So as you go through this class, start a swipe file. Some people do this on Flickr, others do it on Pinterest. I have a couple folders on my desktop where when I see something, I'll take a screen capture or I'll drag the image into the folders. When I'm looking for something or I'm looking for inspiration, the first thing I do is look at my swipe file, and then I go research. So swipe files and sketchbooks are good habits for designers to cultivate.